Hello.
Hey.
Are you excited?
Yeah, I am.
I'm so excited for this episode.
I am too. Because the past 3 times we've recorded, since some of those were banked episodes, I've gone 3 times in a row. So I'm excited just to listen to the story this time and not tell it.
Mm-hmm. Listen.
I'm listening.
Joseph Daniel Casolaro is an American investigative journalist. He was staying at the Sheraton Hotel in Martinsburg, West Virginia, planning to meet a source about a story he called the octopus. On August 10th, 1991, nothing would prepare the housekeeper for what she would find when entering Danny's room, number 517. This is Country Roads Creeps. Am I so loud?
No, you're okay.
There. I'm better.
Okay.
This is an exciting episode. I'm so excited. We get to do conspiracies. We get to do mysterious things.
Nice. You love conspiracies.
Yep. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Country Roads Creeps. Leave us a 5-star review.
Really quickly, before you get into it, let's address the audio issue on the last episode.
It sucked.
The Puck Wedgies episode. We're sorry. It wasn't good.
Sucked. So it's all Hannah's fault.
It wasn't my fault. Payne forgot it was podcast day and had to use different software.
It's whatever.
It didn't sound good. Hopefully this episode sounds better.
I'm going to purposely make it sound bad.
Why would you do that?
So that it's even.
Oh, so we both have a bad sounding episode?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
so
actually nice.
Really, if you could just talk more, then fix it for me.
Okay. Bye.
So, are you ready to do the thing?
Yep. Tell me.
I'm so excited. Oh my gosh. So, okay.
Go ahead.
I was trying to think if I had any news and I don't. So, Danny Casolaro, Joseph Daniel Casolaro, aka Danny Casolaro, was born to a Catholic family in McLean, Virginia. He was the son of an obstetrician and the second of 6 children. One of the siblings got sick and died shortly after birth. And then there was a younger sister, Lisa, who died of a drug overdose in San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury in 1971. Danny Casolaro attended Providence College until 1968. He married Terrell Pace, former Miss Virginia, and they had a son, Trey, and then they divorced after 10 years, and he was granted legal custody of his son. His interests included amateur boxing, writing poems and short stories, and raising purebred Arabian horses.
Okay.
You don't have anything to say about that?
No.
Okay, so...
Want me to have something to say about it?
No, it just... There's only one thing I think about nowadays whenever I think of people raising horses.
And that is?
So the gun manufacturer Glock has, I guess, not so secretly been running like a horse breeding company for the last however long. And so they have like Glock horses. And so,
What?
But the only reason that people found out about this is because I guess they have an Instagram, and Instagram they like throttle any of the search results if you try to look up like gun stuff because they don't want guns on their platform. So if you look up Glock, it's like, I think it's called like Glock Horse Performance or something.
Huh.
And that's the account that pops up if you search Glock. It's their horses. And you can purchase Glock horse semen online. That's a real thing. So people made memes about that for a while.
And this is something you expected me to know and bring up when you said this guy was raising Arabian horses. You wanted me to connect that to the Glock horses? How would I know that? That's crazy. Why would that be what was in my brain when you told me his 3 hobbies?
I thought I would have told you at some point.
No, that's brand new information.
You wanna get like a jar of horse semen for the podcast or something? Like keep it on a shelf?
Don't be gross. Continue your story.
Anyway. He dabbled in journalism. And he looked into some cases like the Soviet naval presence in Cuba and the Castro intelligence network and the Chinese communist smuggling of opium into the United States, according to his own resume. But at least from what I could tell, it's not really clear on how much or where all that stuff was published. So more so like he wrote on his resume that he wrote these stories and like published in like the local magazine or something. Like not really. It wasn't very much of like he wasn't like a famous reporter, which all of my hearings of this story made it seem like he was like a big famous investigative journalist. And he wasn't. Anyway, at the time of his death, he had written and published one novel, The Ice King, with Whitmore Publishing Company.
Wasn't the Ice King a character on Adventure Time?
Yes. Also is the name of one of the Glock horses.
No, it's not. That'd be funny, though.
So, towards the end of the 70s, he dropped his interest in journalism and actually ended up writing a bunch of these computer industry trade publications. They're like trade magazines or like trade booklets or whatever. So he started selling those. And then towards the end of the 80s, he started to take up journalism a little bit more. And he took an interest in the Inslaw case that his IT contacts made him aware of. And that is where our story for today is going to begin. But first, I want to give a little context as to who Danny was.
Okay.
The kind of person he was. There's a really good Washington Post article that was written like right after his death that I'm going to be referencing back to throughout the episode. There's a bunch of quotes that they have through there, so I'm going to try to like note those as I can. But anyway, they interviewed some of the friends of Danny's who said, one of them said, "You're going to find 50 people who come up to you and say, I was his best friend. That's how Danny made people feel."
Oh, that's sweet.
Anne Clank, who's a friend of Danny's, I think later on I'm going to get into that they dated for a little while. She said he could make Friday night seem like New Year's Eve. And a few months ago, she remembers that Casolaro met her for a drink at Duke Zeitbert's. She had recently turned 40. She was depressed. She went to the restroom and she says, "When I came back, Danny had his back to me with his arms raised like a conductor. He turned around, gave me a little wink, and he led everybody singing happy birthday, and I just stood there." And afterwards, she pointed out that her birthday had been several weeks earlier, and he said, "Anne, every day should be your birthday."
Oh.
So seems like a good guy.
Yeah.
Like really
Sounds like
well
a nice-
liked by
nice
his
guy.
friends, always out to have a good time and make people happy.
Mm-hmm.
At least it seems.
Oh, no.
Nothing the opposite of that. I'm just being dramatic.
So nice guy, from what we can tell.
At the time the Washington Post article was written, it says, "Perhaps no one will ever know with any certainty. Martinsburg authorities initially ruled the death a suicide, and their investigation so far yielded no evidence of foul play. They continued to examine forensic evidence and Casolaro's psychological profile. An autopsy report released yesterday said he had traces of an antidepressant and a prescription painkiller in his system. A bottle of pain-killing medication prescribed to Casolaro after a root canal work in 1988 was found in his room. Casolaro's brother, who is a doctor, said that as far as he knew, Danny Casolaro was never treated for depression. And friends are urging the family to hire a private detective." Dun, dun, dun.
So how did he get there?
Danny had told friends and family that he was going to West Virginia to meet a source regarding a case he had been looking into for over a year. It was a global conspiracy that tied together several scandals and alleged scandals, including the Iran-Contra affair, October Surprise, the Bank of Credit and Commerce International, and the Justice Department's alleged theft of software from a computer company called Inslaw.
I didn't realize this was going to be a hometown story until I saw your post today that it was in West Virginia.
Martinsburg. Worst city in West Virginia. Just kidding. I'm joking.
Definitely not the worst. There's way worse.
No. Martinsburg is actually pretty cool from what
that's up near like Shepherdstown, isn't it? Kind of
Shepherdstown,
in that area.
the worst city in West
No, Shepherdstown is cool.
Shepherdstown is cool.
I love Shepherdstown.
So, anyway, let's get into a few of these scandals. Do you know about October Surprise?
No.
All right, here we go. Conspiracy time. I love candles, especially.
I thought you said candles. I love candles.
I love candles too.
Scandals.
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 As opposed to scandalous candles. Be a good company name for a candle company.
I feel
Nobody steal that.
I think it.
I'm taking it.
That almost certainly exists.
Look it up. So
I will while you talk.
October Surprise. You've really never heard of that?
No.
Oh. All right, here we go. In the politics of the United States, an October Surprise is a news event that might influence the outcome of the upcoming November election, mostly for like presidency, whether deliberately or planned. Deliberately planned or spontaneously happening. I thought that October Surprise meant like the one specific time in the Reagan administration. As it turns out, this has been going on since like the 1800s. There's been an October Surprise. So there's been a bunch of them throughout history. The one that I thought of, and I think that most people are going to think of, is during the Reagan campaign. And that's actually when it was officially coined by William Casey in that Reagan campaign of 1980, when he served as a campaign manager for Ronald Reagan's presidential campaign. And for the 1980 presidential election, Republican challenger Ronald Reagan feared that a last-minute deal to release American hostages held in Iran might earn incumbent Jimmy Carter enough votes to win re-election. So basically what happened in the days prior to the election, press coverage was pretty much the only thing that they talked about was the Iranian government's decision on whether they would release hostages or not, and basically what Jimmy Carter was announcing at the time is whether they would be released or not. And he actually announced that the hostages would not be released until after the election. So William Casey, the manager for the Reagan campaign, was the first person to mention the idea of an October Surprise to the press. And on the morning of July 17th, he told the press at the Republican convention that he was concerned that Carter would use the advantage of incumbency to spring an event that would benefit him politically. And he mentioned that Carter had done this during the Wisconsin primary, that he had good news concerning the hostages, and William Casey mentioned to the press that he was setting up an intelligence operation to monitor Carter's political activities and to keep abreast of such a possibility. So that intelligence operation that the Reagan campaign set up was pretty extensive. It used military contacts at key Air Force bases to keep track of military flight movements that could be used to kind of gauge government action concerning the hostages in Iran. It compiled a list of embargoed military equipment the United States government had that belonged to the Iranians and that Jimmy Carter could use to barter in exchange for the release of the hostages. And so the Reagan campaign actually tapped former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger and his extensive network of international contacts. So anyway, Reagan campaign said that there was going to be an October surprise. And the reason that they kept saying this was because if there was, then it would prepare the voters to think that Jimmy Carter was just using it to get votes for the election and not actually because he cared about the hostages. There were some papers left by Joseph Reed Jr. that indicate that the team around David Rockefeller, the chairman of Chase Bank at the time, collaborated closely with the Reagan campaign and the efforts to discourage what they would label an October surprise. So, pre-election release of the American hostages, as it turns out, they were trying to spread rumors about maybe some possible payoffs to win the release. And there was a propaganda effort that Carter administration officials had said impeded the talks to free the captives. So they kind of screwed up any chance of it even happening in the first place by saying that it was going to happen.
Right.
Specifically so that Jimmy Carter could win the election. Anyway.
Take a break.
So, Chase Bank actually held $360 million in loans to Iran and more than $500 million in frozen Iranian asset deposits. So that's kind of interesting. It definitely doesn't have anything to do with the director of Chase Bank being in ties with the Reagan administration to prevent the release of hostages before the Democratic candidate Carter could be reelected, and maybe because they were really good friends with the Republican candidate. Though I don't really know how. That doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, but maybe, cahoots, I believe is the word.
Cahoots.
Yep.
In cahoots.
I've always wanted to be in cahoots with somebody, but...
To do what?
Start a podcast. Spread propaganda about how the government's bad.
Well, congrats. You're doing it.
We're doing it.
We're doing it.
There's a guy named Jack Anderson who wrote an article in the Washington Post in the fall of 1980 about a possible October surprise that alleged the Carter administration was preparing a major military operation in Iran for rescuing United States hostages in order to help him get reelected. And the subsequent allegations surfaced against Reagan, alleging that his team had actively impeded the hostage release. As it turns out, both are true. So, as it turns out, the elected officials out to do things to help them get reelected. So, this just ain't breaking news. Do you know about the Iran-Contra affair?
I should, but I can't tell you anything about it.
This is incredible. I love telling you about scandals. Iran-Contra. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Senior officials in the Reagan administration facilitated the illegal sale of arms to Iran that was subject to an arms embargo at the time. They hoped to use the proceeds of that arms deal to fund the Contras, who were an anti-Sandinista rebel group in Nicaragua. The Boland Amendments were these amendments that prevented any further official funding to the Contras. But if the Reagan administration could use unofficial money to fund a regime change in Nicaragua, then why not? And the official excuse used to justify the illegal arms sale to Iran was trying to free 7 United States hostages held by Hezbollah in Lebanon. So...
But they weren't really doing that?
They said they were going to use this money to free, or they were going to do the arms deal so that they could free these hostages. Mm-hmm. Really, they just wanted the money because it's off the books, technically, and they can use that money however they wanted to.
Right. By
funding a rebel group in Nicaragua. As it turns out, we would actually have to go fight the Contras later on, I think. So.
Oh.
This is like the 8th time in American history that the United States government has used unofficial money to fund a group that we're going to have to go fight later on. And then it happened another 10 times since then. So like, you ever, never mind. So, pick any terrorist group in the news. They have CIA money in their bank accounts. Guaranteed.
Not good.
So, anyway, that, like, this, like, black budget or whatever you want to call it, basically funding rebel groups and funding terrorist groups, might be a topic that we discuss, like, later on, like, maybe some, like, true conspiracy episodes.
Yeah.
But there's not very many of them that are really worth, like, spending an entire episode on, so it might just be, like, a big overview of, like, here's the 30 terrorist organizations that the CIA has funded. So, anyway, that 30 might be a conservative estimate, by the way.
Yeah, you could, like you said, do an overview and then maybe pick a couple to go a little more deeper on.
Yeah, I didn't know until, like, I started researching some of this that, like, how extensive CIA regime change has been in, like, South America, Eastern Europe, the Middle East, Asia, like 6 times in Mexico. Like, what the heck? Like, I didn't know how many times. I was like, it's a handful. No.
A lot.
It turns out it's a lot. So, have you ever heard of the Bank of Credit and Commerce International?
No.
The Bank of Credit and Commerce International is an international bank founded in 1972 by Aga Hassan Abedi, who is a Pakistani financier, and the bank was registered in Luxembourg with head offices in Karachi and London. And a decade after opening, the BCCI had over 400 branches in 78 countries and assets in excess of $20 billion, making it the 7th largest private bank in the world. It came under scrutiny of financial regulators and intelligence agencies in the 1980s due to concerns that it was poorly regulated. You don't say. Subsequent investigations revealed that it was involved in a massive money laundering and other financial crimes operations, and had illegally gained controlling interest in major American bank. BCCI became the focus of a massive regulatory battle in 1991. Golly!
That was so loud.
Loud truck. So,
I think that picked up.
Oh, I guarantee I could hear it in my headphones.
Yeah, that was loud.
So it was the focus of a massive regulatory battle in 1991, and on July 5th of that year, customs and bank regulators in 7 countries raided and locked down records of its branch offices during Operation Sea Chase. And investigators in the United States and the UK determined that BCCI had been, quote-unquote, set up deliberately to avoid centralized regulatory review and operated extensively in bank secrecy jurisdictions. Its affairs were extraordinarily complex. Its officers were sophisticated international bankers whose apparent objective was to keep their affairs secret, to commit fraud on a massive scale, and to avoid detection. End quote. So the Inslaw case. Have you ever heard of Inslaw?
Nope.
Oh boy. It's exciting.
I'm learning a lot today.
Yeah. You're gonna come away with a whole new appreciation for computer aided crimes investigation software. Like I said, sometime in the 1970s, Danny Casolaro lost interest in journalism. You probably forgot we were talking about Danny Casolaro. He coming back. So he started selling these computer industry trade publications. His IT contacts made him aware of this particular case, the Inslaw case, that kind of reignited his passion for investigative journalism. So Danny's advocates believe that the true story of Danny's death began when he interviewed Bill and Nancy Hamilton, who are the owners of this computer software company called Inslaw. They had developed a revolutionary software to speed up case management for law enforcement agencies. In 1980, the United States Justice Department was a huge client. And at first, the program was a success, but according to Ray Thornton, something got a little, as they say in West Virginia, whopper-jawed.
Whopper-jawed?
Yep.
Is that it? That doesn't sound right. Whopper jawed.
Yeah. Quote, this is Ray Thornton's quote. The Justice Department began to withhold payments from Inslaw. This, by the way, this is an acronym, INSLAW, Inslaw. They withheld a couple $1 million from Inslaw and drove Inslaw into Chapter 11 bankruptcy. So Inslaw then discovered that the Canadian government was also using their software, even though they hadn't paid for it. William and Nancy Hamilton told Danny Casolaro that they were confused by what was happening until they talked to a man named Michael Riconosciuto.
Okay.
Recognize that guy's name?
No.
Neither do I. Riconosciuto claimed to have worked for the CIA and knew about the illegal sale of Inslaw's software. He says, quote, I'm going to keep going back and forth on like quotes and notes about what's going on, so just keep up, okay?
Okay.
There's a lot of different people saying things in here.
Okay.
Michael Riconosciuto says, well, the parties that were involved in the distribution of the software were involved in covert operations. And they were involved in Nicaragua and Central America. Hey, where have we heard that name Nicaragua from before? Maybe from the Contras and the illegal arms sale? Anyway. And they were involved in operations in the Middle East. And yes, I have direct knowledge of funds from the sale of this product being used to finance those operations, end quote. A theory was developed about this case. Allegations that quote-unquote backdoors had been inserted into the software, so whoever bought a copy of it from the Justice Department could be spied upon. And the major source on that theory, both for Hamilton and later for Danny Casolaro, was Michael Riconosciuto, described by Rosenbaum as a, quote, rogue scientist / weapons designer / platinum miner / alleged crystal meth manufacturer, end quote.
My goodness.
That's going to be written on my tombstone.
Busy guy.
You know what I'm saying? Shane. Birth year, death year.
Did none of these things.
Rogue scientist / weapons designer / platinum miner / alleged crystal meth manufacturer.
Maybe one of those is true. We'll let the listeners
Alleged crystal meth manufacturer.
You get to pick which one you think is true about Shane.
Yeah, 2 truths and a lie on my headstone. And all of them are like international crimes.
Yeah.
So Congress started to hear about this Inslaw scandal. In August of 1989, the House Judiciary House Judiciary Committee opened a formal investigation. Michael Riconosciuto began telling his story to committee investigators. Within a week, guess what happened to Michael Riconosciuto?
Sorry, I had yawned. What happened?
He was arrested on drug charges.
You don't say.
Riconosciuto told Bill Hamilton that he and Earl Bryan, who is a director of Hadron Inc., a government consulting firm, had paid $40 million to Iranian officials in 1980 to persuade them not to release American hostages before the conclusion of the presidential election that saw Ronald Reagan elected president of the United States. This is the claim now known as that October surprise that I told you about earlier. Remember that? Like 10 minutes ago when I was talking about October surprise? That's this.
Okay.
In exchange for helping the Reagan administration, Bryan was allegedly allowed to profit from the illegal distribution of the Promise System, according to Riconosciuto. The Promise System is part of the thing of the Inslaw software.
Okay.
So, Michael Riconosciuto's drug conviction hurt his credibility, you don't say.
That'll do it.
But another witness stepped forward with perfect credentials, as they say. His name, do you know what his name was?
Tell me.
Elliot Richardson.
Okay.
He was, guess who's Attorney General?
I do not know.
Richard Nixon. I am not a crook. That's that guy. Remember I'm not a crook.
Yeah.
And he's really sweaty. So, he was Richard Nixon's Attorney General until he resigned rather than participate in the Watergate cover-up. The subject of a future Country Roads Creeps episode, Watergate. So now he's the lawyer for Inslaw. In the case, the quote from this guy, Elliot Richardson, quote, "In the case of Inslaw, there's a spreading radius of circumstantial evidence which, at its outer reaches, entails a far more sinister kind of conspiracy than anything revealed in Watergate," end quote. Ooh, spooky. Danny Casolaro believed he had uncovered a sprawling criminal network. Wow. Danny said it was made up of, here's a list: U.S. officials, organized crime members, and intelligence agents. All the same people. So
that are also in organized crime today.
Yep. He called it the octopus. Ooh, spooky.
Makes me think of Hydra from those. Is that Marvel? It has Hydra
Maybe.
as the bad guy or whatever. I don't know. Forget I said that. I don't know what I'm talking about.
John Connolly, who is a journalist, said he believed Danny got in over his head. You don't say. John Connolly, quote, "Danny Casolaro stepped into a world that he did not belong in. The type of people that he became involved with lie, they cheat. They're people who have been involved in numerous murders, dealing drugs, dealing arms. Danny Casolaro thought he could find his way through this labyrinth by himself. And that was a mistake." End quote. I'm having so much fun.
You're doing great.
I'm really excited about this. This is so good. A week before Danny was awarded the highest honor an investigative journalist could be awarded, he was murdered. Tony, his brother, said that he had been receiving death threats. Danny arrived in Martinsburg with all of his notes and his documents 2 days before he died. He was scheduled to meet a bunch of informants and complete this investigation. He believed one of his new contacts would deliver, quote, "key evidence about the finances of the octopus." According to Michael Riconosciuto, Danny had a source inside the IRS's computer data center who was giving him hard copy printouts of IRS information on certain specific targets that Danny was after, end quote.
It's reminded me a lot of the Charles Morgan story.
Ooh, so we talked about him at the very end of Charles Morgan.
Yep. And like, there's definitely similarities.
And there was money laundering going on with Charles Morgan, and maybe some of that was the federal government.
Getting in over his head.
And
around people that did not care about him.
I really like the quote of, I'm going to read this again, from John Connolly, said that the type of people that he became involved with lie, they cheat, they're people who have been involved in numerous murders, dealing drugs, dealing arms, and Danny Casolaro thought he could find his way through this labyrinth by himself. All of those people, the people that lie, cheat, murder, deal drugs, deal arms, the CIA does all of that.
Oh my goodness.
Officially, according to not me being a conspiracy theorist, according to FOIA requests, according to stuff they've admitted.
Yeah.
They just said, yeah, we did that. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
How crazy is that? Man, what is in those lifesaver gummies?
I don't know.
You're over there.
I'm having a hard time. I'm just... I don't think it's the lifesaver gummies. I think that it's...
Are you sleepy?
Heavily pregnant. Yeah. And I haven't had a nap or caffeine, and I can only sleep like 4 hours at night.
You're not supposed to drink caffeine if you're pregnant, are you?
You can. You just have to limit it. I haven't had any today.
Yeah, you're not supposed to drink energy drinks. They say don't drink if you're pregnant.
You can drink 200 milligrams of caffeine. I am listening to your story. I'm just having a hard time holding my eyes open. But I'm listening.
How much?
I'm just really sleepy. What?
How much of this alleged crystal meth being manufactured are you allowed to have if you're pregnant?
None.
Oh. Well, anyway, according to the Village Voice, who is I don't know why I didn't put it here. I think it's this publication in Martinsburg at the time. They were in Martinsburg.
That would make sense.
The Village Voice. What?
That's where they were. A publication in Martinsburg.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Danny Casolaro's whereabouts between late in the day of August 8th and the afternoon of August 9th are unknown. Unknown.
Weird.
Day before he died, according to Martinsburg Morning Journal, he ate at Pizza Hut, where he told the waitress he liked her eyes and quoted The Great Gatsby to her.
Oh, okay.
At me.
Like, you want a man to quote The Great Gatsby to you and compliment your eyes?
Say what?
You said at me.
No, I'm saying like I would do that to a Pizza Hut waitress.
No, you wouldn't.
I'm scared to talk to women.
I was going to say, you and I both know that you would be too scared to do that.
Danny met a Honeywell engineer named William Richard Turner at the Sheraton about 2:30 p.m. on August 9th. And Turner said that he gave Casolaro some documents that, and they spoke for a few minutes, and witnesses reported that Casolaro spent the next few hours at a Martinsburg restaurant, and a bartender there told the police that he seemed lonely and depressed. And the police further learned that Casolaro was seen at Heatherfield's, the cocktail lounge at the Sheraton at around 5 p.m. with a man described by a waitress as maybe Arab or Iranian. So.
Okay.
I guess like at the time, like not like shouldn't be hard to track down like an Arab man in Martinsburg, West Virginia in the 80s.
Yeah, there probably weren't a lot of them at that time.
Probably still aren't very many.
And probably today it's not
like.
Yeah.
Anyway, like how hard could it be?
Yeah.
We're not looking for like you ever watch those or like research those cases where they're like, yeah, the murderer was like he was 5'10", brown hair, white guy.
You're like, oh, that's anybody here.
And you're like, and it's Ohio, and you're like, everyone in Ohio is a 5'10" white guy with brown hair.
Yeah.
Every guy.
Yeah.
Is that description. Like, did he have any markings? He had like some freckles maybe. I don't know.
That does nothing for us.
He had like, he was wearing like jeans.
Yeah.
Like, are you...
Like all of the most common descriptors possible.
Are you trying to be as vague as you possibly can?
Yeah.
And then this lady's like, he was an Arab man in Martinsburg in 1990 or 91 is when this happened. It's like, so there's 3 in the entire town.
Yeah, probably.
So anyway, and there's only like 100 people at the time. I don't know what's the population of Martinsburg?
More than 100.
So not in 1991. There was only like 1,000 people in the whole state.
In 1991? What are you talking about?
So about 5:30 p.m. that night, Danny met Mike Looney. He's the guy actually who his grandfather was the illustrator that made those cartoons.
The Looney Tunes?
Mm-hmm.
For real?
No. So
oh my gosh.
Mike Looney rented the room next to Casolaro's room, number 517, and they chatted on 2 occasions. The first was about 5:30 p.m., and then again about 8 p.m. And Looney later explained, quote, Casolaro said he was there to meet an important source who was going to give him what he needed to solve the case, end quote. According to Looney, Danny claimed that the source was scheduled to arrive by 9 p.m., and around that time, Casolaro left Looney explaining that he had to make a telephone call, and he returned a few minutes later and said that his source might have blown him off. Casolaro and Looney talked until about 9:30. And at about 10 p.m., Casolaro bought coffee at a nearby convenience store, and that was the last time anyone reported seeing him alive.
Sad.
Oh, yeah, it's sad. Spooky. Anyway, there was no sign of Turner's documents that he had given Danny or Danny Casolaro's research papers. Ooh, spooky. To this day, not one of those papers has been found.
Oh my goodness.
Ooh, spooky.
Because they burnt down in a courthouse fire.
No, because the CIA / the Iranians took them, I guess.
And burnt them. Probably.
Maybe. Martinsburg police arrived on scene. In the room, they found a suicide note and a single razor blade in the bathtub.
I don't believe it.
That's what they found.
Well,
those are the facts of the case. Danny's wrist had been slashed 12 times, 8 cuts on his left wrist and 4 on his right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe that it was suicide.
One cut was so deep, it severed a tendon.
Jeez Louise.
Jeez Louise. We're not talking about Louise, we're talking about Danny Casolaro.
Okay.
His body was taken to a local funeral home later that afternoon. But strangely, according to journalist Jack Anderson, Danny's family and friends weren't told about his death until 2 days later.
What?
Ooh, mysterious.
Yeah.
Initially, Martinsburg police ruled his death a suicide. But no one thought that. Literally nobody.
Yeah, me included.
Well,
I don't think that.
Hannah typically believes the official story.
Since when?
Since the moon landing.
Yeah.
So, there is a lady that I don't think I've mentioned yet. Maybe I have. I don't think so. Her name is Wendy Weaver.
No, you have not.
She dated Casolaro for 7 years.
Oh.
And at one time lived with him. She said Danny hated the sight of blood. And she said, additionally, he didn't like to be seen naked. To be found in a bathtub naked, that's not Danny.
Yeah, so like if he was going to do it, he wouldn't have done it that way. That's not how he would have wanted to be found.
No, actually, they kind of make a joke about it later on. His friends do, so which is like, it's kind of dark, but it's sort of funny the way that they say it. There's a guy, Arthur Weinfeld, who is a retired staff officer at the National Security Agency, who was a friend of Danny's family for 28 years. And he considered the circumstances over and over again. And he says, quote, I come out with 100 different answers, and I've stopped playing that game with myself. But I can say that Danny Casolaro, who is my best beloved friend, who I grieve for very much, was not a person that would have committed suicide, end quote. The friend group that he kind of kept around, they say that they smoke cigarettes pretty regularly, pretty like kind of chain smoke cigarettes. Mm-hmm. He's a journalist in the 80s and 90s. So,
right. They're all doing that.
Yeah. Which, like, by the way, like, there's some of these cases that I'm sure eventually we're going to get into where they're like, oh, this journalist had amphetamines in his blood system. So he was clearly a drug addict. And it's like, no. As it turns out, those amphetamines were like ADHD medication. Mm. And every journalist is on ADHD medication. Like, for like, there's like a good 25-year period where like every journalist was taking what's that stuff called? Ritalin?
Yeah.
Or Adderall. Adderall's the one that's like
just to help them do their jobs.
Yeah, because they're working so much. Like some of these international investigative journalists are working like 20 hours a day, and they're like, I need something to help me focus. So anyway, he said that they smoked cigarettes pretty regular, but Casolaro had never used drugs. He said he never even smoked a joint that I know of. And Wendy Weaver agreed and said Casolaro liked his Budweiser, but he didn't drink to excess. But some witnesses in Martinsburg said that he drank heavily in the days that immediately before his death. So the autopsy report actually concluded that there was no alcohol in his blood at the time of his death. And then there's this lady, Anne Clank, remember that name? She says,
Yes.
it's not like we're all in mass denial. It's the fact that we knew him for so long, and you'd think there would be something, some crack in that exterior. She said she found the suicide by razor to be the most improbable.
Yeah.
She said, quote, he would have jumped off the Empire State Building with firecrackers.
Oh.
Because again, like, his personality was like, you know, he's a very...
Picturing that now. That's so morbid.
Yeah, honestly, he was super morbid. But that was her conclusion of, like, knowing him for...
That he would not have done
20 years, like...
Staged.
Yeah, he's not going to slit his wrist in a bathtub naked.
Yeah.
Like, if he was going to do it, he would do it in, like, some kind of grandiose way. But let's get into Danny's career a little bit.
Okay.
Before we get into some of the Spookville. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
By many conventional measures. You like the way that starts out?
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was pretty impressive.
Is that your own words?
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
So I go through and I'm like, I have to copy all of these quotes, like word for word from the Washington Post thing. And I can't read a single thing of them, like, because none of them match, like, none of this stuff that's, like, quoted from this article is, like, I don't talk like a journalist from the 90s.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I can't, my tongue gets in the way.
Oh, just read it.
I can't read.
Yeah. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Don't look at me like that. You can read, you just don't read. Don't like it, because you can't focus on it.
Danny Casolaro was not a very successful person.
Oh.
I said that earlier. He was kind of... A lot of his articles that he said in his resume were like... they weren't really published anywhere.
Yeah, it's just sad to hear you say it after knowing what happened to him.
Well, he was successful as a journalist, investigative journalist, investigating the government, I guess.
Sorry.
Are you for real?
It was an accident.
I wonder if that picked up in the mic.
It did, for sure. 100%.
His career in journalism is... Well, so I'm going to read this part. This is... Because this is kind of quote heavy too. Says his career was undistinguished. His attempt at entrepreneurship didn't really pay off. Being in debt was more a rule than the exception. He published one novel, which he apparently paid a vanity press to print. So I don't know what a vanity press is. I think that's where, like, you can pay them to print you books and then you just sell them by yourself. It's not really like a real publisher who, like, picks you up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't know for sure, but that makes sense to me. That sounds right.
This is, like, quoted from his own resume, says he participated in some of the most important investigative efforts of the last 20 years for newspapers and scientific journals, end quote. But that record is kind of thin. So, says his stories appeared in places like Home and Auto, El Dorado News, Times, and Media Horizons. So he wasn't like he wasn't being published in, like, national places, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, okay.
So, about the writing on the Inslaw / octopus case. Danny Casolaro started to develop that octopus conspiracy theory about so what I read was a crime cabal, which is what I typed in my notes, but I don't know that cabal is, like, the right, because when I think of cabal, I think of, like, black robes.
Okay.
And, like, Satan worshiping. And like
I don't know what that is. I'm not familiar with that term.
a cabal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think cabal just means like a group of powerful people that are conspiratorizing with each other. But when I think of it, I think of like a really like dark and spooky, like Illuminati style Freemason Skull and Bones Society kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
But what it actually probably means is just like the people who run the media and the government and the CIA are all conspiratizing with each other to kill this one particular guy who found out about their stealing the software of this company. So anyway, there was also a part of the article I read, and I didn't put it in my notes, and I meant to, but one of the guys that they were interviewing said that he found himself in a Bermuda Triangle of like organized crime, money laundering, black budget government operations, and something else. And he listed 4 things, and I was like, well, that's not a triangle.
That's a quadrilateral.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a triangle. So this article is stupid. Washington Post, like, yeah, I was pulling up, like, I still have a couple tabs open because there was a couple of things that I wanted to read specifically from them, in case I forget. But he was developing this octopus story, more of like a conspiracy theory, as one of his friends is going to say. He's not the only writer to get the notion of this story. As it turns out, it is like an actual massive conspiracy theory. The term octopus is more accurate than I thought originally, because it's actually like 8 different scandals that all tie into the same thing.
Well, fitting then.
So there's another person who's pursuing another story, the same story, and they said that Casolaro called him in early June and tried to scare him off and said that he had a book deal and even a movie deal wrapped up. And this guy named Roger Donald, who is top editor at Little Brown Books that Danny submitted a proposal to, said that could not be further from the truth. And said, I'll tell you this, anybody who killed him over that manuscript made a mistake. That was not a book that was going to be published. So, and you just...
Oh my gosh.
The next 2 paragraphs are just this guy roasting Danny's writing. So, 6 to 9 months ago, Donald said that he met with Casolaro, and he got the book proposal, said it was very hyperbolic and very unprofessional. And a couple weeks before his death, Casolaro called and said, I've really got the whole thing together now. And he said Casolaro revised the proposal and showed no improvement.
Oh, geez, Louise.
He said, my final remark to him was, I could write this outline. I could say there have been the following crimes and list them. Maybe he was onto something. And he says, but he sure as hell couldn't express it.
Harsh.
So, like,
He needed an editor.
Well, this guy is the top editor, so.
He needed to help him.
Well, the government got to him first, so.
Oh.
This is. First of all, so the other thing I don't like about reading these like really quote heavy versions of notes that I have is it formats everything super weird when you try to like copy a quote.
That's why you have to do paste match style.
I do the paste no formatting thing, but it makes it spread weird. So
do paste and match style, and it'll match the way you type your notes, so it all looks the same.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Paste match style. It'll all be the same.
My notes look like a freaking like a manuscript. The way that they're written.
I don't know what you mean by that.
Like a ancient manuscript that nobody can figure out what it says. I'm saying.
You gotta match your style.
This is an unknown language to scientists 1,000 years from now who find this computer. Like, this is a nightmare. Danny changed after he got wrapped up in this octopus theory, according to his friends. He got obsessed with it. So this lady, sorry, not a lady. That's the next page.
Try again.
His friend, this guy, Joe Lane, says he called him, and he was really more reserved. But he called him and said, "Joe, I'm scared. I've been getting threatening calls." And then Joe said, "Why don't you get off this story?" And Danny said, "I can't, Joe. It's too deep. It's bigger than anything I've ever encountered in my life." And he says, "Joe, this is bigger than anything I've ever dreamed of." And remember that Weinfeld guy? He's the National Security Agency guy. Mm-hmm. He said that he doubted the octopus theory. And it says, quote, Danny would call me and say he had this or that deposition, this or that piece of information. He would run it by me, and I would say I'm skeptical about the quality of the source and the validity of the information, end quote. So Danny would go show him like depositions or like documents or whatever, like, here's a deposition from a Pentagon official. And Weinfeld said, I thought it was a lot of garbage. So.
All right, then.
Yeah. So there was some options that Danny kind of considered. He was going to fictionalize the story and like make a novel or movie about it. But the reason that he wanted to do that is because he hadn't succeeded yet in doing like actual journalism. So he thought if he had this story and he fictionalized it, then he would be successful in just making the fictional story. And Weinfeld said that he thought that Casolaro might get into trouble because of he had some mistaken belief in the story. And he said that he urged Casolaro to read Foucault's Pendulum by Umberto Eco. Said, quote, one of the thematic events is that the protagonists invent this fictitious conspiracy, and it turns out there's a group of nuts out there who had a disposition to believe this kind of thing. And the book ends when that group kills the protagonist who invented the conspiracy. And, quote, I told Danny, this is what it seems you're involved with. You're helping to create a conspiracy where there is none, end quote.
I want to help create a conspiracy.
We're doing it right now. I do conspiracies every day. So
yeah.
Do you know how many conspiracies I send you like on Instagram that like I don't even think are real? I'm just like
too many.
I'm just like, let's see.
Too many.
Sometimes some of them are like, let me see if Hannah will bite on this one.
No, there's too many of them.
West Virginia authorities opened a formal investigation and ordered an autopsy. That's when Danny Casolaro's brother, Anthony, said, let me sit up. He received some shocking news.
Good voice.
Thanks. Quote, the assistant medical examiner from the state of West Virginia said, well, you know, he's already been embalmed, and that's going to make it a little difficult. End quote. And Anthony said, what are you talking about? He's already been embalmed. And he said, the medical examiner said, well, he was embalmed apparently already. And said, you didn't know that? And Anthony said, absolutely not. We didn't give any permission. He had already been embalmed.
Oh, no.
The autopsy confirmed that Danny had bled to death from the razor cuts on his wrist. But Anthony said, more importantly, it revealed that Danny wasn't alone in his hotel room during his last moments.
Yeah, go figure.
Quote.
He was getting killed.
Would you let me quote? Jeez, I've got like 30 of these all lined up. Don't throw pillows. I'm quoting here.
You have 30 to read?
At least that's many left. There's so many quotes. It's an investigation.
Paraphrase it, but in your own words.
Everything these people said are quotes.
Paraphrase.
They're like, these are interviews that they've done.
Summarize.
No, it's important, and they say them so funny. Says, the actual autopsy report described a bruise on the arm and a bruise on the head, which were never accounted for. I was told there were no signs of any struggle. Additionally, the tips of 3 fingernails were missing from one hand. Spooky. Don't just not. It's scary.
I can't say anything because you yelled at me to let you finish quoting. So do you want me to talk or do you not? Or not?
Yes.
What do you want from me?
I want you to be my friend.
I'm trying. Then you yelled at me.
Do you think one of us is going to die from mysterious causes for doing this podcast?
Yeah, probably.
It's going to be you for doing monsters.
It's going to be you for doing government conspiracies. They're going to take you out.
She found out about the bridge trolls. We got to get rid of them.
Somebody avenge us, please, whenever that happens.
You can't say stuff like that.
Why?
That's threatening the government or something.
No, it's not.
Sure it is. The government's going to be doing the killing.
I didn't say... No, not if it's a bridge troll that gets me.
I'll say it. Avenge us.
Mm-hmm.
When the hotel room was cleaned by... It's a professional cleaning crew that came in. The day after his death, there was important evidence that was destroyed. It's interesting that they would come in a day after the death to clean. Although I guess if they ruled it a suicide initially, then maybe it's just procedure to go in and clean the room instead of... Because maybe Martinsburg police didn't know that he was on the case of this huge government conspiracy.
I'm sure they didn't.
Or maybe they did.
I'm sure they didn't. And
Find out this summer.
Decided that it was a suicide and they thought case was closed, so then go clean it up.
Yeah. One of the housekeepers saw 2 bloody towels in the bathroom minutes after Danny's body was found. And it looked like they were used to wipe blood off the bathroom floor.
Weird.
Ooh, weird. Spooky.
Who did it? How did...
Journalist John Connolly questioned how the scene was handled by authorities. Quote, "The police reports of the investigation are certainly not professional. Fingerprints get lost, get messed up. They drain the tub without a strainer. Sloppy work. Police have a rule in this country. Government people have a rule. When they screw up, they cover up. Sad but true. Do I think they covered up here? Yes, I do." End quote.
All right.
That reads to me like, the old timey movies of the Private Eyes or whatever, like that SpongeBob episode. He's like, the day I lost my identity.
Yeah.
It reads to me like that. So
yeah,
anyway,
I could see that.
Elliot Richardson believes that the evidence indicated some foul play. There were chickens involved, it turns out, not octopuses. Octopi.
Foul play. Is that?
Yeah.
That's what you're doing there?
Yeah.
That's pretty funny.
I know. That's why I made the joke. Says, quote, "There's enough evidence that he was murdered so that there should have been much more intensive investigation than there had been. All that I do know makes me believe that this was more likely that he... Sorry.
Try again.
I can't. Quote, "There's enough evidence that he was murdered so that there should have been a much more intensive investigation than there had been. All that I do know makes me believe that is what makes me believe that it was more likely that he was murdered than that he committed suicide." Sorry. So that was the one that I typed. And I
Paraphrase it.
And I didn't spell check it.
Oh my goodness.
So, oops. We're here at the end, so. Oh boy.
Hang in there, everybody.
The funeral was clouded by mystery. Ooh. They said that there was a highly decorated military officer arriving in a limousine near the end of the service, and no one at the funeral recognized him. That man carefully placed a medal on the casket just before it was lowered into the ground. Anne Klink said, "We went back to Frances' house, Danny's mother's house, and I said, 'Frances, who is the military man?' And she said, 'I thought you'd know.' And we asked everyone there. There had to be 50 people at Frances' house. No one knew who they were. No one." End quote.
Weird.
So, the investigation... Oh, excuse me. The investigation of his death was closed. West Virginia authorities and the Department of Justice representatives declined to participate in the story that was posted on Unsolved Mysteries. Did you know that? They refused to participate in the Unsolved Mysteries.
I did not know
By the way,
that.
this case was on Unsolved Mysteries, that show from the 90s.
Yeah. I wonder why. Well, I guess because they just didn't want to get caught up in it.
They also refused to, I also put this at the end here, West Virginia authorities and the Department of Justice representatives declined to participate in the Washington Post article, too. All the places, every place I pulled a quote from, there's like 4 articles in here that I pulled quotes from. Every one of them at the end said, West Virginia authorities and the Department of Justice representatives refused to participate in our story.
That's suspicious.
That's weird. And then the last thing is most of the friends and family are convinced that he did not commit suicide.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with his friends and family.
Well, I find it sometimes easier to not question the government.
Shut up.
So, there's the most infuriating thing in the world is that I'm holding my tablet now, but I'm saying every article I read, every single one of them that had like official, like it was written at the time or it was investigating the story and they had quotes from people that they interviewed. Every single one of them said, we reached out to West Virginia authorities and the Department of Justice and they refused to participate in the story.
Yeah.
Every single one of them. They refused to
Speak up,
participate
people.
in the Unsolved Mysteries.
Speak your truth.
They refused to participate in the Washington Post. They refused to participate in who's the other one? The New York Times.
Yeah, that's super weird.
How upsetting is that? I couldn't find. Listen, this is the reason that I put that at the end. I couldn't find a single quote from anybody in the government, except for the retired guy from the National Security.
Incriminate themselves. Maybe
the government doesn't. You know what's weird?
What?
About the government, now that you mentioned it, the government incriminating themselves. Do you find it weird that, like, there's some hearings in Congress where they say, like, hey, is the FBI involved in this thing? And the FBI official who's there is like, we can't comment at this time. And it's like, so if the answer was no, then you would just say no, right? That you're not involved.
Probably.
And if the answer was yes and you were allowed to say that, then you would say yes. If the answer was yes and you weren't allowed to say that, then you would say we're not allowed to comment. But if you didn't have anything to do with it, then you would just say no. So now everybody knows, right?
Yeah.
Everyone knows that you're involved and you're just not saying that. But then the thing is that if, you know what I'm saying? Like you do have, like as a citizen, you do have like the right not to incriminate yourself, right?
Right.
I don't think that should go the same for government. Just being honest here. Like if you're representing the government.
Yeah.
I don't think you should be able to be like, plead the fifth. Like, no, you're a government agency. You don't have...
I agree with that.
You don't have the Fifth Amendment because you're the FBI.
I agree with that.
So...
I guess. I mean, I don't really know enough probably
if you're
to say I agree with
a person who's like, and they're like, hey, were you involved in this thing? You as a person would be able to say, I can't say because it's...
Right.
I'm not sure that that's in the scope of this.
Agency.
But if you're representing the agency as like their person, it's like you are the agency now. You're speaking for the agency. So...
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
So whenever you're like, hey, do you want to participate in this article that we're writing about this guy that you killed? And the government's like, no. That's weird, right? Maybe it's not. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. No, I'm just mad that every article I read, every article said right at the end, and it's the exact same like quote text tagline, we contacted the Department of Justice and the West Virginia authorities, and they refused to participate in our story. Every article said that. Every one of them.
Good voice.
Thanks. So, what do you think?
Like I said earlier, it's very similar to Charles Morgan, which is where you mentioned him at first. They both died under weird circumstances that were claimed to be a suicide, but really don't seem like they were.
What's this?
That's a thank you card.
This is has my name on it. I
meant to give that to you before we started recording.
Oh, I'm not going to open it now on the podcast.
You can open it after.
Okay.
It's a thank you card because you bought presents for mine and Dirk's baby. And we're thankful.
You're having a baby?
Surprise! Surprise! In like 4 weeks, we're having a baby.
You're going to be a mom.
Yeah, really soon.
And I'm going to be Uncle Part 2.
Yeah, cute.
Now, so that's one of the things that I get to have that's like slightly special is I'm like the non-blood uncle.
Yeah.
Like, because like, doesn't every family have like one of those that's like...
Yeah, they're called like...
This is your Uncle so-and-so, and you've grown up your entire life calling them Uncle so-and-so, and then you find out when you're like 20 that not related.
Not related at all.
They just showed up one day and never left.
Yeah.
Like...
Yep, that's how it is.
Yep. So, what do you think? Because I interrupted you and
that's
I saw
okay.
my name.
I was just saying it's really similar. And I don't know. I mean, I don't, with his friends and family, I don't think he did it.
Yeah. I'm exhausted.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I can't, usually like some of these episodes I can go through and like, I can write like a note and then talk about the thing or like have like a paragraph in mind and like, or like type it out, or I've experimented with a few different ways to write my notes. This one is so quote heavy. Every article, the Washington Post had like, it was like paragraph quote. And I read the thing from Unsolved Mysteries and it was like paragraph quote. And then I read a thing from the New York Times and it was like, and I was like, oh my God, everyone, they interviewed everybody and everybody's got something to say and it's all like makes for an unhinged mystery. So
I'm also exhausted, but for different reasons. So
Hannah's been pretending to be pregnant this entire time just so she can get food brought to her and like...
You were bringing me food before I was pregnant, so don't even pretend.
Yeah.
Speaking of, the corn dog lemonade stand is back in town. And we need to go because we only have like 2 more weeks of it left and we haven't been yet.
How late is it open?
They're not open on Mondays.
Oh my God.
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Wednesday.
So
Monster Truck Rally.
Let's wrap it up.
Okay. Wrap it up. Put it in a bow. I think the government killed him, honestly. Being fair with you.
I thought that's what we were leaning towards here.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I would like to ask you a question because I need to record one that we're going to release for the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And I've already done the next episode that you all are going to hear. Do you have another full episode before you're pregnant or before you give birth? I mean,
yes.
You do?
Yes. And I have not completely decided what it is, but I was playing around with the idea of like compiling haunted colleges. Haunted universities.
Okay.
And why they're haunted. I don't know for sure if I'm going to do that next or save it for later. But yeah, I have another full episode.
Okay. Well, the next time you're going to hear from me...
Hand me my phone so I can look at the calendar really quick. I might have 2. Thanks. Okay, continue your sentence.
The next thing that you're going to hear from me is going to be the Fermi Paradox.
Are you sure?
Yes, that's the mini that I recorded.
Oh yeah, you're right.
And then
yeah, so they're going to hear one more full episode from me, and then it goes into our banked episodes.
Yep. So the next week, I'm going to record one that we're going to bank up for the summer. And I was wondering if you would like to hear one of the scandals that we talked about today, or if you would like to hear a spooky history story.
Spooky history.
Okay. Just tell me you hate conspiracies then. It's fine. Tell me you hate Nicaraguan rebel groups. Jeez, just say that. Just
I'm not going to say that.
So, then I'll do a history episode then. And it'll be a surprise for the both of us.
Okay, cool.
So, and then it'll just be a story, and because they can't interview dead people.
So you don't have to read quotes.
Yep, I hate reading quotes. I can't stand it.
Then don't do it. Just tell it to me in your own words.
You have to read the quotes. It's part of the story. It's the people said it. His friends said it for me to read on a podcast one day.
All right. Good job. Good episode. I'm uncomfy and I'm out of energy, so we gotta go.
Thanks for listening. This has been Country Roads Creeps.
I don't like that.
Yeah, you're right. I let it go on for way too long.
Yeah.
Oh, this has been Country Roads Creeps. Thanks for listening. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Country Roads Creeps. Leave us a 5-star review. And if you are investigating a story that the government is involved in,
be careful.
Be careful who you talk to. Don't let anybody into your house who's wearing a suit and sunglasses. Or who looks like they might be from the government. Be safe driving home. Watch out for the glowy boys.
And
CIA agents. That's what I'm talking about. They glow in the dark. And the not deer also glow in the dark sometimes. Bye.
Bye.